Good evening and welcome. Today is Monday, November 3rd, 2019. If we November 3rd?
November 4th.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, November 4th. Monday, November 4th, 2019. This is a workshop of the Board of Education. If we could please start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Carl, did you want to open the presentation tonight?
Sure. Once a year, the district presents its state assessment performance data. We typically do that in the late fall, early winter. This evening we have with us Dr. Ellen McDonald, our Assistant Superintendent, also from our elementary school, Principal John Morash, and we have our middle school principal, Greg Stiefel. And they will give you an overview of grades 3 through 8, ELA, mathematics, and I believe also science.
No, science is still embargoed.
Not science, it is still embargoed, so then at the next workshop, we're planning to have secondary, and we'll add science to that presentation. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Ellen McDonald. She'll introduce tonight's
If you
data.
could just explain what it means when it's embargo, when the information is not being put out. If
Sure.
you can explain to the community, because I don't
Sure,
think they know what
the state tells us when we can release it publicly. So basically, they are still analyzing the data statewide, and we have to wait for them to give us that permission. So right now, 3 through 8 is public information, and we will be presenting it this evening.
Okay.
ELA and math.
Very good. Thank you.
Evening.
Good evening.
So this evening, as Carl just told you, we'll be looking at our 3 through 8 state testing data, as long as some of our other measures of how we determine how children are doing in this district. Last year, we made some significant changes to this presentation. It actually occurred in January, and this year's, you will see, follows a similar path from last year's, because we felt we wanted to, though our requirement is to talk to you about state testing data, we wanted you to have some other measures so you get, and the community gets a sense of other measures that we use as well to determine how children are doing here in Tuckahoe. So we'll first go through state testing data by building. Our principals will come and present the data. You may recall, those of you who were watching last year, I presented all the data because they were new principals. So none of the data was theirs. And so I did that, but I am very pleased to have our two principals join us this evening to walk you through the data from their buildings. So I'm going to give you some overview, and then I'll close it up at the end with some K through 8 and district-wide ideas of what we're doing. So the first thing we want to just remind the community of is what our demographics looked like for last year. And this is information that comes from a report that we call our BEDS data, which is an October snapshot. So this is what the state has recorded as our enrollment under, grand total enrollment, K-12, physically that attend school here, our racial and ethnic breakup, and then our English language learners are 5% of the district. Students with disabilities were 13 and change. It rounds to 14%. And 20% of our district is economically disadvantaged. This is a snapshot, and it does loop all of K-12 together. There are definitely differences by grade level. Being such a small district, a few children at one grade level can swing your percentages widely. So know that in a small district, there are grade levels that, for instance, do have more than 14% students with disabilities, and other grade levels with significantly less. We're just so small that each child on a grade level is worth more than 1% of your data. Want to remind you of something as well that happened last year. The state moved from a 3-day or 3-session, they called it, test design to a 2-day or 2-session test design on these performance standards. And so what they cautioned us last year remains this year. Last year we were told that we could not statistically significantly compare last year's data to any of the prior years, and that last year, the 2018 data, would be a baseline from which we could compare futures. We will, as we did last year, still give you 3 bars, but as the principals will remind you as well, the 17 bar really can't be directly compared to the 18 and 19 bar. It's real data, it just doesn't statistically connect with validity. Also a reminder that the parent score reports dramatically changed last year. According to the state, they're easy to understand and read. I'd love some direct feedback from parents if they want to provide any. I'm happy to send that on to the state. They tried to make results more visible and just in general tried to simplify how they explained what was going on. So I pulled an example for you from this year to remind or to tell. In the ELA 3 through 8 tests, there are both multiple choice and open-ended questions. And students have to apply their knowledge, not just restate things that they read in the text. And so this was an example of part of a reading from grade 5. It was an excerpt from Andrea Beatty's Cicada Summer, and they had to read, and then was multiple paragraphs, and just one of the questions was, what does the phrase, quote, wound up like a tiger ready to pounce, end quote, from paragraph 8 suggest about Judy Thomas? So though that is in that paragraph, without reading the whole thing, a child really would not have a good grasp of how to answer this, and that they had to use 2 details from the story to support their response. So they're writing these open-ended responses at the 5th grade level, interpreting a literary choice of a description where there's no actual tiger, right, in the story. And so how do they understand that and use the text? Just for an example for you to see. Math 3 through 8 also has multiple choice and open-ended. Again, they need to apply what they're doing, and they do attempt to write some real-world-based problems, and there's a significant amount of graphical interpretation at each grade level. It gets more complex. So a sample question from grade 3 was about cupcakes and a person making them for her friends, and it says they started at 2:40 p.m., and then it takes the number of minutes that it took to complete each step in the process. So this problem not only had children dealing with adding up the minutes to get things done, but they had to add on the layer of time, knowing that there are 60 minutes in an hour, knowing when they had to wrap from the 2 o'clock hour to the 3 o'clock hour. It was beyond just the simple addition of minutes. The question didn't ask how long it took. It asked what time did they finish. And that's an extra layer of understanding that a student would need to have. And they're doing that at the 3rd grade level. We have in Tuckahoe, as with many districts in the region, had students that do not test for multiple reasons. The reason that I keep the 2013-14 bars on our graph is because that's the first year that Long Island went to test refusal. There were large campaigns to get kids not to take the state tests. There were concerns on many different levels, one of which was that the tests were linked to teacher performance, and teachers who taught the most challenging kids were getting bad scores, and why are we doing that? And Tuckahoe got on that the next year. So that's when we started to see a larger increase in refusing to test. And you'll see it's gotten a little better each year in terms of we do have more children participating in our state assessments each year since that began. However, please note that the state's threshold for acceptable test refusal is 5%. We are expected to have 95% of our children participate in testing, and we are still significantly far from that here in Tuckahoe. That does impact some scores that we get under the new ESSA regulations and guidelines. So there are places where we get low scores because it's divided by number of kids who should have tested. There's another calculation divided by the kids who did test, right? We get multiple measures out of this, and that's a whole other presentation that we can talk about, and I'm happy to come back and have that conversation. But know that we are getting dinged for not having 95% of our kids participate in our tests, but more are participating every year. And with that, I believe I'm turning it over to the elementary school and Mr. Morash.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald, and good evening, everyone. Many of the data slides you're going to see tonight reference the percent of students proficient at levels 3 and 4. So to clarify what that means, state test scores indicate the proficiency level of students in ELA and math on a scale of 1 to 4. Okay? Level 3 proficiency indicates students who demonstrate knowledge, skills, and practices in line with the state ELA and math standards that are considered sufficient to meet the expectations for that grade level. Level 4 proficiency indicates students who excel in state ELA or math standards, and they demonstrate knowledge, skills, and practices that are more than sufficient for that grade level. So with that in mind, that explanation in mind, this slide represents the percent of Cottle students who achieved that level 3 and 4 on the 2019 ELA test, as compared with comparable groups in Westchester and throughout New York State. And as you can tell from the slide, across all grade levels 3 through 5, Cottle students surpassed their county and state peers. Okay. This slide illustrates a 3-year comparison of the percent of students in grades 3 through 5 who achieved that 3-4 proficiency in ELA. However, as previously mentioned and explained by Dr. McDonnell, due to the state's 2-session test design and performance standards, the 2018 and 2019 3 through 8 ELA and math results cannot be compared with the prior year's results. The new baseline was established in 2018, and therefore 2017 results indicated here are based on a different test design that is no longer used. So again, with that in mind, this chart indicates a 7% increase in ELA level 3-4 proficiency in grade 3 students, a 7% increase in ELA level 3-4 proficiency in grade 4 students, and a 9% decrease in ELA level 3-4 proficiency in grade 5 students. This slide further explores the data by offering a 3-year comparison of grade 3 through 5 ELA results by cohort. Okay? So this chart indicates, I'm going to start on the far right this time. These were last year's 5th graders who are no longer at William E. Cottle, and they are the current 6th graders. Again, just a reminder that the 2017 test number shown is not a comparable measure, as it was from a different test. The 2018 to 19 tests indicate a 4% decrease in this cohort from their grade 4 results. The middle column, this is the current 5th grade cohort and last year's 4th grade. The 2018 to 19 test results indicate a 1% increase in level 3-4 proficiency in this cohort from grade 3 results. And the left column is the current 4th grade and last year's 3rd grade. And the 2019 test results indicate that this cohort scored 69% level 3-4 proficiency in their initial testing in grade 3. Okay, we're going to switch over to math now. So with the same explanation of the meaning of the level 3 and level 4 proficiency in mind, this slide represents the percent of Cottle students who achieved levels 3 and 4 proficiency on the 2019 math test, as compared with comparable groups in Westchester and throughout New York State. And again, across the grade levels, grades 3 through 5, Cottle students surpassed their county and state peers. Okay. As with ELA, this slide illustrates a 3-year comparison of the percent of students in grades 3 through 5 who achieved level 3-4 proficiency in math. Again, as was previously explained, due to the state's new test design and performance standards, the 2018 and 2019 ELA and math results cannot be compared with the prior year. The new baseline is 2018. So again, with that in mind, the chart indicates a 4% increase in math level 3-4 proficiency in grade 3 students, a 10% increase in math level 3-4 proficiency in grade 4 students, and a 10% decrease in math level 3-4 proficiency in grade 5 students. Okay. This slide, again, further explores the data by offering a 3-year comparison of grade 3 through 5 math results, again, by cohort. So the chart, again, starting on the far right, these were last year's 5th graders and the current 6th graders. Again, the 2017 test number shown is not a comparable measure. The 2018 to 19 tests indicate a 10% decrease in this cohort from their grade 4 results. The middle column is the current 5th grade and last year's 4th grade. The 2018 to 19 test results indicate this cohort maintained the same level of 3-4 proficiency at 76% from their grade 3 results. And the left column, this is the current 4th grade, last year's 3rd grade. The 2019 test results indicate that this cohort scored 80% level 3-4 proficiency on their initial year of testing in grade 3. So I'm just going to put these all up here. Excuse me. So it's interesting because a lot of the initiatives and the programs that we've rolled out this year at Cottle actually work out in perfect alignment with a response to, or a way we would have responded to New York State testing data that came out this year. Starting with our Envisions 2.0 math program. So grade 5 is the last grade to make that transition to the Envision 2.0. They're doing that this year, and in my opinion, that is better aligned with the next-gen standards. As you know, we have partially departmentalized in grade 5, and it is with this new model that teachers become specialists in core subject areas. They're able to create more focused lessons and devote more time to ELA and mathematics. Collaborative K-8 approach, ELA and reading programs. So in alignment with our strategic plan, actually tomorrow will be our first meeting at the Superintendent's Conference Day. Our grades 4 through 8 and really 4 through 12 teachers will be meeting together to discuss practices, methods, strategies on topics that align with standards at each of their grade levels. And we're going to share how they do that. And the goal here is to create better vertical alignment across the grade levels. Okay, so that's our first meeting. And our K through 2 students will actually be meeting with Dr. McDonald to do sort of a reverse look using New York State testing data on how can they best prepare for areas that may have been areas of concern or weakness specific to standards that came as a result of New York State testing. The WIN period we initiated this year, which is off and running, and it is doing everything we'd hoped it would do so far. It's an opportunity for teachers to teach individually or small groups beyond the grade level standards, or to provide additional support in ELA and mathematics to keep them in the least restrictive environment, which is in the classroom. And it's a solid 45-minute block, 5 days a week. So when I talk about WIN, that's where the emphasis on Tier 1 and iReady comes in. It is in full swing. It is in use. It has been positively received by the teachers. And again, it's a software that the teachers use during the students use during the WIN period in ELA and mathematics. And again, it's to keep them in the least restrictive environment. We have an iReady representative coming in this Wednesday during the extended day to meet with our kindergarten through grade 2 students. The iReady representative will be working with the teachers on reading the data and how to best use the data that results from the students that are using iReady, and those are the students that need that additional support and foundational skills in ELA and mathematics. The grade 3 through 5 teachers will receive the same professional development from the iReady representative on the December 4th extended day. And grade level data review meetings. So Mr. K and I will be meeting at grade level meetings, extended days, and or faculty meetings, however much time we need, in order to meet with the grade levels to review in more depth the New York State testing results. It's to data mine the information that is presented to us from the state. It's not to teach to the test, but it's to identify those areas of weakness and concern and figure out how can we address those needs. And that pretty much summarizes the grade 3 through 5 testing report. And I will hand it over to Mr. Stiefel for the middle school. Thank you.
If there's any questions
yeah,
from
no,
the board,
I'm sorry, any questions? Yeah, please.
It might be answered at the end, there's some K stuff at the end, but
Whatever,
Oh, okay, go ahead.
whatever you'd like to
whatever
do.
way you want to do it.
No, that's okay.
We'll wait to the end then?
Yeah.
Yep, Mr. Stiefel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murash. Thank you very much. I want to begin
by saying good evening, everyone, and I want to thank a couple of people. We have to thank Mr. Michael Olivieri, who puts the data together for us in this nice presentation, Dr. McDonald, who helps us make some sense of the data, and I also want to thank Mr. Scott DeBellis, who at the middle school, high school, and on behalf of Mr. Morash, I'll thank Mr. Pete Kilgallen for administering these tests. It is a heavy load every year when the boxes of exams come in to get them out and have all the students to take the test at the same time, but they do give us some important data. So without further ado, here's what it looks like 6 through 8. This first slide is for the 2019 ELA 6 through 8 scores. So it shows the proficiency level of level 3 and level 4 students. And as you can see in green, Tuckahoe, when compared to districts similar to it, is doing on average about 15 to 20 points higher in the 6 through 8 ELA scores. Again, that first blue column is the column that we can't look at in comparison to the current scores in green, but it is interesting to see how the trend is upward as they made the tests shorter and they made the sessions shorter, the number of questions shorter. This next slide explains the 2019 ELA 6 through 8 scores comparison by grade level. Starting on the left is 6th grade, in the middle is 7th, and 8th in ELA. And it shows us at 70%, a small drop-off in 6th grade, and again in 7th, but 2 to 3 points is a statistical. With the number of students that we have, it might be different students taking the test. Those numbers are pretty much equal. But it is worthy to note the jump in 8th grade. I think the Writing Revolution program has a lot to do with that, and our continued expertise in that area is starting to pay dividends. This next slide is the ELA comparison data by cohort. So now you're taking a look at the same group of children over time, and you can see in 6th grade a jump from 61% to 71%. In 7th grade, a slight decrease, and again, even slighter decrease at 72%. But again, these are the students that are scoring 3 and 4 on the test. That's a good number. It's approximately 2/3 of the students who are scoring in 3 or 4 range. This next slide takes us into the realms of math, where we see the 2019 math 6 through 8 scores, proficient level 3 and 4 as compared to Westchester in red. Interesting to note the outlier in 8th grade. You might wonder about that. That has to do with the students that are not tested. Our Algebra 1 students don't take the 8th grade test. They don't take the course, so they don't take the test. And therefore, the students who are taking this exam are the students only who did not end up in the Algebra 1 course. So it's a different cohort of students. This slide shows a 3-year comparison by grade level. 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. This is 2019 math 6 through 8 scores. And this is the slide that shows the same cohort. And with this particular group in 8th grade, there was a high number of opt-outs. And there you have, a number of students who took the test was probably around 20. So that number reflects the students who took that test. But I am happy to say that the number of opt-outs seems to be going down, and I hope to continue to send the message that although the tests are administered by the state and they are mandated, they are also a helpful way for us to measure student performance from my perspective, and as many students as possible should take them. And we should just begin to continue to see a decrease in the number of opt-outs. Supports and initiatives. We have a tiered support model that's reaching students at their own level. It contains academic support classes, what we call AIS classes, that are monitored continuously. Students come in and out of the AIS classes through the course of the year. They're targeted towards specific data in terms of the strands of test questions that students didn't do as well on, and then the students can move out of the AIS classes because they occur during the special area classes. Their kids are highly motivated to do well for maybe 4 or 5 sessions, and then they end up back in their art or their technology class or their STEM class. We're going to continue to examine the need for multi-leveled instruction, so that's differentiation within the classroom. Right now, we sort kids, and we have an accelerated class and a non-accelerated class. We're wondering about what it would look like to have multi-leveled instruction in every class. There's a curriculum review, as Mr. Morash was talking about, in Dr. McDonald's Professional Development Day planned for tomorrow, where we're going to take a really close look at what the curriculum is going to look like. First session is for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, taking a look at how it links down to the elementary school, and the second session will take a look at how it aligns with the high school. Training teachers in Just Words and Writing Revolution continues. And we have our 2 writing liaison coaches. Tomorrow from 2 to 3 o'clock, they'll be going through the latest collection of student writing, analyzing how the students' writing has grown from 6th grade moving forward. And this year we had 3 of our new teachers start the Writing Revolution training, and they talk about it with rave reviews. They think it's fantastic. Integrated into the 8th grade, the 8th grade science classes, and also into our special ed classes now. Writing Revolution is really taking a hold. 6th grade math and 5th grade math are going to continue to work to see where the curriculum ends and where it begins in 5th and 6th grade to make sure there's no gap. And that work's going to continue tomorrow. Perhaps the biggest change, not necessarily in response specifically to this data, is we reinstituted the math lab class, where each 6th grade student has 45 days of additional math instruction. For them, it's during period 1, where the teacher, Ms. Pappas, has broken out the most difficult units of the year and pre-teaches those to those students during that time. I think we'll see that pay dividends in future years. 6 through 8 supports. Is this where Mr. Morash and I talk together, or is this still just me, isn't it?
It's you.
We have the summer reading program. We have the summer scholars program. Extra help is available, and our teachers, I have to say, give more extra help than they have to by contract. It's a rare day when this building isn't packed with the kids who are looking for extra help. It's hard because there's often so many kids in the classroom that specific questions can't get answered, but there's a lot of practice and coaching going on. We're placing students appropriately to the best of our ability in accelerated classes and making adjustments as necessary. So certain students will move up into accelerated class, and some students might move down in order to make sure that we're continuing to deliver their instruction in a developmentally appropriate way. And one of the greatest strengths of our schools is 6th grade still looks a little bit like the elementary model, especially when it comes to ELA, because of the double block of English that is taught by the same teacher. So every day the students have a full 90 minutes of ELA. And I have to tell you, I've been and recently observed Dr. Tiselli's class during one of these blocks, and the depth that they can go into because of that extended time is really strong. Last but certainly not least, any middle school that operates on a team concept, make sure that the back side of the schedule or the go side of the schedule has common free time for teachers to meet frequently and to go over cases where students are struggling and to plan interventions. So this happens regularly. I witnessed a 7th grade team meeting just 3 or 4 days ago where parents were really struggling with some physical disabilities of a particular student, and the team got together. They were able to make an intervention plan, and the student has since moved forward with success. So those ongoing team meetings are really, really critical.
That was me.
And now I'm going to pass it back to Dr. McDonald for a conversation about formative assessments. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we added in last year was to give you some other lenses of data and other things that we look at, because the state testing data is a snapshot of a couple days that our kids are producing, and so we wanted to build on that we had started last year. So this is the same information from last year in terms of STAR with an extra bar added in. Last year I had offered you what happened in one of our early years with STARs, the blue bar, the 15-16 year, and last year I showed you the 17-18 year, and I just added on another bar this year so you could see what the grade level equivalency was looking at the end of year data. For STAR. So in each of the grade levels, this is again on average, right? So that means there are some kids that are above this, there are some children that are below this. We're not looking at individual kids here. But on average, in each of our grades 3 through 8, the grade level equivalency is slightly higher than the grade level that they are in. Except 6th grade this year came out at pretty much exactly 6th grade for STAR. And in math, we see a similar profile. That our math equivalency grade level is slightly above that of the grade that the students are taking. And interesting, this year and last year, there was a big jump from 5th into 6th grade. Right? You see that 5th grade the last couple years, they've been averaging at a 6.1 or 2, and 6th grade by the end of the year was averaging at an 8th grade level. So that's that's just an interesting piece of looking. I wanted to try to show you a different way that we measure what's going on with the writing revolution. So this is a different look than last year. We do work with the writing revolution. It's part of a contract that we have with them for them to look at actual student data and actually score it. And this year we're trying a new model of that where our teachers are a part of that process as well. We recognized that we were missing some knowledge of kids at the individual level by letting them look at all of it. Then our teachers aren't looking at, they're looking at data all the time, but these particular items, they're just sending them off for someone else to review. So we're trying a different model with them this year so we can get a little more internal capacity, a little more personal understanding of our own students before we send it off, right, for their review. But these were the levels of 3rd grade. Percent of students at each level on their single paragraph rubric. So the red is, they score on a scale of 1 to 5, all right? Where 3, the green is they're proficient at the grade level that those who rated them at the Writing Revolution would consider them to be. So this is the beginning of 3rd grade last year on the left, and the end of 3rd grade on the right. So at the beginning of the year, you had 61% of kids at beginning or developing of 3rd grade, which makes sense because you're at the beginning of 3rd grade. And at the end, you only have then 24% of them are still scoring on this one individual writing assignment at developing and have clearly grown in their performance in writing. I just selected a few to show you. We could be here all night, right, if we kept going. But just another example. 4th grade, how they looked at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. And you're basically making a flop from the underside of proficient to the overside of proficient, right? And it's really all the kids doing a shift. It's, moving up. I wanted to show you, as we did last year, just what the visual examples look like. What does it look like to be a kid that's writing? So I picked a different grade level this year, just to keep giving you different views. And this is 4th grade. And the beginning of the year writing assessment that we did with the Writing Revolution was a single paragraph essay with an outline. And by this point in 4th grade, the kids have learned how to use this single paragraph structure. So you see on the left, the child wrote a topic sentence, and even just the visual, even if you can't read it from where you are, will be impactful when I go to the next slide. And they put their 4 little details in their concluding sentence on the left, and then their paragraph is written on the right. And this is what that same child looks like at the end of the year in terms of how they write out a topic sentence and their 4 details and their concluding sentence in outline format, and then how the ending paragraph looks. There's a lot more depth to the language choice. All right, a lot more positive phrases, a lot more subordinate conjunctions. Starting off with although there were. It's a complex way for sentence structure that we build on a lot in our writing that this child is able to, and many others, are able to put into paragraph form. So that is one thing we do. I wanted to show you, well, two actually, showed you STAR and showed you some writing revolution work. So just wanted to either do as a reminder or as a new, depends on how long you've been paying attention to these things, what we do from the K-8, right? So STAR that we just showed, we use in K through 8. There's actually an early literacy one that we use in kindergarten and first grade pre-reading. One that we can look at. That's K through 8 and high school for those that have interventions. K through 8, we do, you'll see it on our high school report as well, data analysis to identify student needs and program adjustments. One of the things we're working on this year, based on some of that ESSA reporting that we had last year, is I started working with our administrators, and then we'll bring it to our teachers, of looking at two subgroups. One is our economically disadvantaged kids, and one is our special ed kids. And not only looking at how they performed on the test, but in that same view, looking at those who didn't test. Because for some of those subgroups, over half of the kids didn't test. So we don't have the data from the state on how to help those children. So putting that all in one view and seeing that whole subgroup and realizing, okay, here's the ones that tested, here's the ones that didn't test, we need other measures for all of them. Let's pull their STAR, let's pull their writing samples, let's pull their tests out of Envision Math, and let's figure out really what needs to happen. And that's one of the exciting pieces, that because of the ESSA, some of our scores in subgroups came low because of non-testing. We're taking that as an opportunity. We don't take that as an excuse. We say, well, we still need to see what's going on, and let's go look at other measures for our non-tested students. So that we're doing this year. As has been mentioned, faculty meetings and extended day meetings, we use them for professional development all the time. We're focusing on writing. We focus every year, one of our 2-hour meetings on how we all work with our ENL students, because our students, where English is a new language to them, are in with our general education population all the time. We can't just teach our teachers who are specialists in that area, but all of our teachers, right, need work in that area, and other things as identified in our strategic plan. We do have a new model for our peer tech support this year. We are blessed to have a new staff member with us who is our STEAM teacher at Cottle, and we very purposefully and intentionally designed her job so that she will take on the peer tech support role for Cottle. So for the first time, Cottle has an elementary specialist helping them really think about how technology integrates into their classrooms. She also pushes in to do creative things. It's just, we could go on and on about her and what she's able to do. But it is provided now we have a person who commits to high school, Dr. Mosier, Mr. Moore in middle school, and Carly Canapero in Cottle, and then we all meet together once a month to say, hey, what's happening across the grade levels, and they do go to each other's places as needed. But we've already seen some great success. People feel very supported and feel like they have their person that they can work with. Our writing liaisons are continuing to work with Writing Revolution. I'll leave this because Mr. Morash already talked about the things that we're doing tomorrow in terms of our vertical alignment. This year we have social emotional learning curriculum liaisons. That's new. I thank the board for supporting those positions. And those two teams, there's an elementary and a secondary team, are part of Learning Through Yale's emotional and emotional intelligence group. I don't know what the name of their center, that's what, Center for Emotional Intelligence. There we go. And they go to Putnam Northern Western's DeBosis as a team to learn about how we start building adult capacity. That's what's in our strategic plan. And then they will be turnkeying professional learning with us back here. That's new this year. So that's all the pieces, and we are happy to take your questions.
Great.
Did anyone have any questions?
I had a question for Mr. Morash. Just what stuck out to me with the K through 5 was the ELA and math 5th grade dropped about 9%, 10%. Do you have an explanation for that? What's your thoughts on that? What do you think is at play there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I took a deeper look at it, other schools in comparable districts in Westchester County saw the same drop or decrease in 5th grade scores, particularly in mathematics, okay? Which tells me that the test could have been flawed in some capacity in terms of the wording of some of the questions on the test. It could be a number of things. And I was going to bring that up before, but I certainly don't want to come across as defensive, but I think it is something to consider.
Well, you did also mention that it's the only class that hasn't had Visions 2.0.
That has not had, and they're transitioning to it this year.
Well?
Yeah, so that was the next thing that I was going to say. So, that's the first one that has not made that transition, that is better aligned with the next-gen standards in mathematics. When it comes to ELA, I had up there, where I talked about the vertical alignment, I had up there about the reading and the ELA programs. So specific to COTL, we are actually coming to the end of our subscription to Reading Wonders, which is the K-5 reading program that we use at COTL. So those meetings, and the first of which we're having tomorrow, will be very helpful as we begin to investigate the new reading program, or how we're going to put together the reading program in K-5 to ensure that vertical alignment. So this data is going to help with that investigation, as well as those meetings tomorrow.
I just have a question also. So just to piggyback on that, so does the next gen standards, does that come into play when you're picking curriculum for, when you say we sort of were done with, or maybe done with that curriculum, does that come into play, and how does that? Because I guess I'm not really clear myself on the next generation standards and how that comes into play with your curriculum selection.
So there were the Common Core standards, and now there's the next generation standards, which hasn't had that big of an impact with ELA and mathematics, but it's had an impact. So topics are covered a little bit differently per grade level and things like that. So being that the standards have changed a little bit with next generation standards, that has to be considered when you're deciding on a new program or resources that you're going to use to teach topics at any grade level. So the next generation standards will definitely be considered. We'll definitely be thinking about those and using those as we make our decisions.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Trish.
Sure.
I guess this really isn't for you, John. I have obviously the math in the middle school, so I guess it's more Mr. Stiefel.
Okay. Thank you.
Was concerning, and specifically why you had written about reinstituting the math lab. Why was it discontinued? I don't even know if you know why. Or
It was discontinued before my time.
right.
And I would say that a district is always looking at programming and deciding how they're going to spend time. And there is a cost to putting the math lab in that those students that are in math lab have less physical education right now. So if we were to look at our program and say, do we meet all of the requirements for middle school statewide in all of the subject areas? You'd have to say no, but many of our neighboring districts are in the same boat because there isn't enough time in the day, and you don't want to shorten your periods down to 30 minutes
Right.
so that you can just have the seat time in those classes. And actually, I'd like to see us consider going the other way and have longer periods. And a lot of data that we're collecting in our observations from teachers is they're telling us that they're not getting to the deeper end of the lesson because 45 minutes isn't necessarily enough time. So I would say that the decision was made because they felt secure in where they were with math, and we had an experience last year with our 6th grade math students where we perceived that there was a deficit in their learning. And when I learned that Math Lab was a program that existed in the past, we met with Dr. McDonald and the math teachers, and it was unanimous with that group that we try to put it back in place.
So when we had the math lab, were our students performing better?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but
you weren't here
I
either.
wasn't here yet.
Yeah.
But we could look back at some of that data and get back to you with that.
I guess on that same note, I guess maybe tomorrow you're going to be looking at it with the other grades, like, is it being looked at to add math lab possibly? And I'm glad to hear that you're looking at time too, that maybe they do need more time, but to the other grades as well.
We haven't thought of that. That would require additional personnel, for sure, because the math teachers are currently teaching the AIS as their 5th period, except for Ms. Pappas. So, that's something to consider. The other thing to consider, again, is what did we lose when we add that into the program? And from my perspective as a middle school principal, an examination of the program becomes in order when we start to ask too many of these types of questions. And we can take a look at different scheduling options like, a modular rotating 6-day cycle with 6 periods or 9 periods in the day instead of the current number in order to satisfy what we would want to do. There are many different possibilities.
I just want
Do
to,
they-
I'm sorry.
But there's no current planning to put math lab in the 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah, no, I just didn't know if, what things were being looked at. And the other thing I was thinking also is to any, I guess, even within the area of math, because I feel like that probably is the hardest one, where you may need time and more sort of individualized, looked at to like class size. And I know everything comes down to funding, adding classes, but like class size, is that a factor? Because I do know that with all the classes being increased, and I'm saying that now because classes are big, to make the classes smaller, would it then be a better impact for students and for teachers? Easier to instruct and to provide that differentiation?
I think everybody would be in agreement that the smaller the class size, the better. But in a school of this size, with only approximately 100 students on every grade level, with the number of course requests, including the accelerated classes and the different music classes we offer. So we offer students to take chorus, band, and orchestra if they want to. That's something that is a luxury that could be looked at differently. That's what I say when we start to ask such big program type questions. It might be a trigger to do a full middle school program review. But it is conceivable.
I have just one more question. So the Envisions 2.0 curriculum that's in Cottle, what curriculum is carried through in the middle school?
In most middle schools, at least in our area, it's a combination of Engage New York, the Common Core, and then a teacher-created curriculum. So it's impossible to say that it is a particular program. And that's primarily because the state has changed the curriculum so many times that the teachers are trying to keep up. And we're providing time for them to now catch up with the next generation standards. So what they'll do is they'll comb through what they currently do and make sure there aren't any glaring gaps in what the state is going to say is the current curriculum, because then they'll say in 2022 they're going to start testing that curriculum, and we want to make sure that right now we're like in the introduction phase of that, and then you get into the implementation phase of that curriculum, and finally you get into a testing phase of that curriculum. It's changed so many times that the teachers, and I kind of expect this of my middle school teachers, to choose the best of each, and then to own it and build it and write some of the curriculum themselves, so that they have, a real passion for the particular units of study that they're teaching. Now, there's a downside to that. It's hard for tutors outside to really know what we're doing. It's harder for parents to support kids. But the upside to that is we really know what the students can and are able to do in the classroom. So to answer your question, and I kind of was long-winded, we don't have one particular program at the middle school for mathematics. Okay. And I'm not so sure that's a bad thing that we don't.
Thank you.
Sure.
So that drop from Math 8 was pretty dramatic, and you addressed it. I think you gave two explanations. One was that's the grade where a lot of kids are in Algebra 1 and they don't take the test.
That's right.
And the other one, I believe you said a higher percentage of opt-outs in that class. That was a little puzzling to me. Is there a higher percentage of opt-outs in math in the 8th grade than there was in other grades?
Dr. McDonald seems to be chomping at the bit to answer that.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Eighth graders get their parents to sign a note on a napkin and get out. They don't want to be in it anymore.
Really?
One of the reasons is their compatriots in the Algebra 1 class aren't taking that test already.
So
that's created a context.
Okay. How many kids do we have in Algebra 1?
Right now, there's one pretty large class of about 30.
It's about 30 kids. Is that average per year?
How is that? Yeah.
Yeah. It's about a third.
And what does it take to be placed in Algebra 1? I don't remember, Mike. kids went through? What is it, what do you need to be in algebra?
There's a criteria that's on the website that I don't want to say specifically because I might muck it up.
I misquote it,
I might misquote it. But it's about test and quiz average
Right.
close to the 90% number. So the homework scores are taken out, and I think that's correct. And there's also a pathway in if you're not in an accelerated 7, but it's admittedly a narrow pathway.
So
And-
it's safe to say, I would say that all the kids who qualify for Algebra 1 would likely be 3 or 4 proficient. Right? Do
Maybe,
you
because
extrapolate?
some of the
Okay.
units of study are different,
Okay.
so they're not taking the course.
Okay.
But in an Algebra 1 class that also teaches some of the Math 8, and jumping in any time, that also has some of the Math 8, where a school district has committed that all the 8th graders will take that test, you'll see a real leap in their 8th grade math score. So if
I
we
was
were to
wondering
say
if you kind of
all 8th
calculated
graders
it.
must take that test,
Yeah.
and if we were to say then, we're going to change the curriculum, so there are, I think there are probably 3 primary units of math study that would need to be inserted into the Algebra 1 course, almost like review, then the students would be prepared and they would do very well.
I have just a piggyback on, are you finished, Pete?
Yeah.
So when you talk about differentiation in the 6th, so when you mentioned there was a deficit in 6th grade, and then 7th grade, I did notice both the cohort and the other graph you showed, 7th grade went down in math.
Yeah.
So you have a 6, and then you have 7, then you have 8, but then again, they don't take tests. So it's sort of foggy to know what exactly is going on, but it does sort of seem that there's a pattern of weakness, so to speak, in the math, like you said, the deficit you mentioned. So bringing back the lab sounds, I know my son, one had the lab, one didn't. And the lab, we happened to go in as parents and observe, and the lab was sort of, the day I observed anyway, they sort of get packets and they group off. They sit in groups with each other to give you a little sort of what I saw the lab look like. And I guess thinking about that and thinking about math in general at the middle school, differentiation, what would that look like? In other words, the math lab looked to me like they went off and they did more work, which was good, and they worked with their peers, right? And again, it may be different now. But in your mind, as the principal, what would differentiation look like in all grades so that if a kid in 7th grade is even an accelerated for that matter, but he happens to be in a 30 kids and is not getting it, but the teacher's got to sort of move on, is there a way that we can better address the needs of those kids in math? Because I think both the class size and the speed at which this math rigor is out there is there. You're seeing that in the numbers. I think you're seeing that they come in 6 and then we lose them a little bit in 7th. So it's a long question, but I hope that made sense. Differentiation is my question, I guess.
I think the work of Carol Ann Tomlinson speaks best to differentiation. She wrote numerous books about it, and she talks about hitting kids where they are by perhaps giving out tiered activities and tiered assessments within a classroom so that you can get what's called a not yet, which means I don't quite get this concept, so I'm going to be in the group that's in not yet, and the teacher's going to know that this is the not yet group, and then you have the just right group, and then you have the what's next group. And then kids can come in, and on test day, they can actually choose which test to take.
Interesting.
But you see that takes all of the grading validity out of the class, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And what I mean by that, now everyone's not taking the same test, but you are meeting kids where they are and moving them forward. And the question for us as leaders in the district to ask is that a model that we want to see rather than the separation of students into accelerated courses, which is what the model that we have now. It's a really interesting question. Leads to really great debate about philosophy of education and so on.
Right. And just sort of then pushing as a group ahead versus just kind of breaking off and knowing who needs that extra help. I find that, just from speaking from my own, experience with it, a lot of times, especially in Accelerate, they just keep moving along, and you have a big group, and their kids fall between the cracks a little bit in that scenario.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just one other lens to give it, just to sort of give you just one other thing to think about, is that in Tuckahoe, we have the historical decision that we start accelerating in 7th grade, right? So we take, in math, because I'm sticking with the topic, right? So we take 7th, 8th, and 9th, and we teach it in 7th and 8th. And there are other districts, I've worked in one where we started accelerating in 5th. So you took 5th through 9th and put it into 5th through 8th. So the individual grade level lift is not as heavy. And that's a conversation that can be had here if you so wish. When do we want to start exposing students to that accelerated pathway, and what could that do then to preparedness for that pathway? Because to take 2 into
Right. It's a
3
lot.
into 2
Right.
is a heavy lift, and that teacher is going to have to move every day.
Right.
They don't have much of a choice on that if we're going to get through algebra by the end of 8th grade if we don't even start accelerating till the beginning of 7th.
Right, right. And I think that also goes in line with what we were talking about, Dr. McDonald, about showing not just state data on a test that's given that one time, but using STAR and using different data so you can say, okay, here are my underperforming, here's my average, here's my high achievers, and by the way, maybe I can accelerate them. And I think that we never really see data like that. We sort of just see this, I don't know, we see certain percentages or a snapshot of STAR, but it doesn't really tell you, as parents, we kind of know what's going, we have a better feel when our kids are in these classrooms. But as a collective board coming up with ideas and listening to what's best for the students, these reports only can go so far for,
Right, and we couldn't publicly go much farther, because we're so small that if I start telling you about those subgroups that I was just talking to you about, you're going to know exactly which child I'm talking about. And so know that and have comfort with the fact that we are dealing with this at an individual child level
Right.
with teachers.
Right.
And so our teachers know the names of the 14 children in that subgroup and how they performed and where are we going to grab more testing data and help individual children. But that is not a report I will ever bring you here publicly, because you will
Right,
automatically
good
know who
point.
I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
Valid point, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Carl, did you have anything you want to add? You're good? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, we started our meeting in executive session. We did not close it, so we are going to continue our executive session. We will see everyone back here on November 18th is our next regular board meeting. So thank you all, and good night. Okay. So